Now, from the east of the African continent to the southern part, where President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa says his country will not risk going to war with Russia. Now, Ramaphosa said this in an affidavit responding to Democratic Alliance court bid to have Russian President Vladimir Putin arrested in line with an International Criminal Court warrant, ICC. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa said South Africa would have problems executing the request to arrest Putin and is aware of the dire implications if the country were to contribute towards his detainment. He further said Russia had made it clear that arresting its sitting president would be a declaration of war. In his affidavit, Ramaphosa said the government is obliged to keep confidential how it intends to process the matter. Now, joining me live to shed more light on this particular development is Senior Training Coordinator, Institute for Security Studies, Williem, and also Security Political Analyst, Professor Seepe. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. All right, so let's get to it. The first question being, of course, you, Professor Seepe. For how long? I mean, for a long time, this conversation has actually been lingering, and of course, we've seen it's been focused more on Russia-Ukraine conflict. And now that the BRICS summit is, just around the corner, perhaps we should also speak about the relationship the BRICS countries themselves have, and the ongoing political parties of these countries meeting in South Africa. Your thoughts on these relations?
Well, I mean, BRICS exist, among other things, to improve and increase trade relations amongst the countries who belong to BRICS. And we are aware that there are other countries that are beginning to join BRICS. So you're talking about another global sphere of influence. And in a sense, it has created some fraternal relations that of brotherhood or sisterhood among these countries. So effectively what happens in one country would obviously have an impact in terms of those relations. And the meeting yearly of BRICS is about cementing those relations. And here what we also see is that the fact that the summit might be disturbed, where one of the BRICS members might be hampered from attending, would be of concern to the other partners. And this is why the issue of BRICS summit and Vladimir Putin coming to South Africa becomes an issue of interest, not only to South Africa, but also to Russia and not only to South Africa, but also to China, as well as India and other people who may be invited. So you could talk about the cementing of relations that is going on. But going back to the issue of President Ramaphosa indicating that the idea of arresting Putin when he lands will create difficulties for South Africa. And he presented a number of reasons, but he understands fully well that South Africa is obligated in terms of it being a signatory to the Rome Statute, that they should, President Putin put his foot in South Africa, he should be arrested. And it is for that reason that the DA went to court to seek a declaratory order where South Africa would be compelled to arrest Putin once he lands here.
Now, I want to go to you, Mr. Williem. Now, of course, let's talk about this particular sentiment, which I want to ask if you actually share, that Putin being the most wanted man now, and any move away from his home will put his life in danger of being arrested. But on the other hand, there's an insistence that he physically attends the summit. Now, the big question here is it necessary, and what exactly does he stand to gain with his physical presence at the summit?
Well, once again, we must understand, I agree with the professor, but also that Russia is a founding member of BRICS. And we also must see this in the background of what is going on at the moment in Europe and in Russia with the war, where President Putin actually wants to make a stance after he's been marginalized to some extent that he can still travel. So he wants to send out a message in terms of that. But also on the other hand, you must understand that South Africa is one of 123 countries that not only signed the ICC or the Rome Statutes Court, but they also ratified it in the year 2000, but they also domesticated it in 2002 by implementing the Rome Statute Implementation Act. So there it's a catch-22 situation for our President Ramaphosa, because now if he does not adhere to these regulations and to the statute and the law of South Africa, now he will be breaking the law. So there is actually, however, a clause in the Rome Statutes, and that is in terms of the President's affidavit that became known yesterday, where they argue that in terms of Article 97, they may approach the ICC if they have a problem. Now that is a problem to the extent that, you know, they left it till a bit too late because they have a history of not adhering to the ICC statutes when President al-Bashir from Sudan was in South Africa, and then actually a warrant of arrest was issued in South Africa, and they assisted him, the government actually assisted him to leave South Africa in the middle of the night with a lunchbox on his arm. So that was quite a embarrassing incident for South Africa, and they should have prevented that. But if they had these issues and they foresaw that this might have happened, they should have approached the Rome, the ICC a long time ago, because we understand that this process that they embarked on now is going to take some time.
All right. Now, I want to go back to you, Professor Seepe. Now, let's also talk about South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and also his statement by his deputy, Paul, that there are indications that South Africa may not want Putin to come, but at the same time, for political reasons, they cannot tell him, you know, what to do. Now, in this situation, I mean, what's your take?
Well, I think the South African government has put itself in a bind. The most important thing is that you have a country that wants to be loved by everybody. And when you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And what we now know is that it is not working. They could early on have indicated that as signatories to the Rome Statute, there is a difficulty in hosting the summit. And until that matter has been clarified. And they should also have indicated that the courts of South Africa had already pronounced themselves on the matter. And given the history where the government ignored the court order and to arrest al-Bashir, it would be again been seen as a government that has become rogue, that has no respect for the law and order. And when you do that, that government cannot expect other people to respect the law and order and the courts of this country. So they were already in a bind, but they chose not to be honest with other BRICS partners. Now, what they have tried to do now to go back to say, can we approach the ICC and see if there is a way out where we can indicate that this order will be difficult to execute. And that is the only thing that they have.
All right, Professor, I'm sorry I need to cut in because we are really pressed with time. But I would like to direct this next and final question to Williem, if you don't mind. Now, it appears like South Africa is caught between the rock and the hard place. What would you suggest South Africa, does right now, quickly?
Yeah, like you rightly mentioned, they are between the rock and the hard place. The challenge that is also been mentioned by the Vice President, as the Professor mentioned, in terms of the legal advice, it is better for President Putin not to come, but we also see that President Putin insists that he wants to come. So tomorrow there is a court case that will be brought by the opposition. The outcome of that court case, I think, will determine and also direct us in what's going to happen.
All right, thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me first start with a prayer. And the prayer is that Toby Amusa is cleared of this.
Okay.
Because our biggest bet for a medal, I'm not talking about gold, it can be gold, it can be silver, it can be bronze. Our biggest bet for a medal is Toby Amusa. After Toby Amusa, the rest, when I say the rest, I'm talking about maybe 2 or 3, they are all 50-50.